it is 4:03. I'll run you through the agenda for what we have on for today. So we were first going to hear from Andrew Brown, who is our Funding Catalyst lead. He will briefly talk about the other members of the Funding Catalyst team, Dr. Katie Green and Ben Hilborn. And then Katie will tell us a little bit about herself because she has a very unique specialty. So we'll hear a little bit about that. And then she will introduce a company called True Angle. And then we will hear from True Angle's CEO, Dr. Jana Rieger. And we will hear a little bit from Jana and Katie about what the engagement with the Funding Catalyst team was like and how that went and what that meant for True Angle as a company. We will then have an opportunity for a Q&A. So if you have any questions at any time throughout this presentation, feel free to just drop those into the chat at any time, and we will get to those towards the end of our conversation this afternoon. And then finally, we'll have an opportunity to talk very briefly about some of the other services that we offer, namely the product attraction service. So let's start with just a little introduction to Thin Air Labs itself. So Thin Air Labs is an ecosystem studio. Now that is a term that we created ourselves because we realized that we really are a new type of venture builder in the sense that we actually support many ventures, not just a few ventures, but we support many ventures. And then we also support our critical ecosystem studio partners in the innovation ecosystem. And then we also support the innovation ecosystem itself. So the fundamental idea being that the rising tide lifts all the boats. So in many ways, we are trying to support all kinds of innovation in our ecosystem to get this innovation ecosystem growing and thriving rapidly. So that's the idea of the ecosystem studio. And that's what we are. So we support ventures with capital, with community networks, and also with some services. And that's why you're going to learn a little bit more today about the Funding Catalyst Impact Service. So to do that, we're going to hear from Andrew Brown. And Andrew Brown, a quick intro, although many of you I know already know Andrew, but Andrew Brown has been a co-founder of numerous ventures in professional services and software enterprise. He is our head of business development and the Funding Catalyst lead at Thin Air Labs. He's very passionate about supporting the innovation ecosystem in Alberta and beyond, and has great empathy for founders and entrepreneurs. And he truly believes, as we all do at Thin Air Labs, that entrepreneurs will in fact change the world for the better, and we're just here to help them do it. And that's exactly why we designed this Funding Catalyst service. We just want to help entrepreneurs, and we truly are a founder-first organization. So Andrew Brown, over to you to outline what the Funding Catalyst is and how it works and the value for founders.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Leah. I appreciate the kind words and intro. So for those of you that I don't know, as Leah mentioned, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I haven't had a quote unquote real job in many, many years. I founded my first business coming out of university from Mount Royal University, actually here in Calgary, and never really looked back and just jumped into various other ventures along the way, including starting my own, raising capital, building teams, building product. So for those founders in the room, I know how hard it is to be in your shoes. I know how difficult it is to start something from nothing. And that's really why we've designed the Funding Catalyst service and all the other impact services around founders, because we understand what it's like to be in your shoes, and we understand how important it is to be surrounded by people and resources that can help you succeed, all under one umbrella and with easy access. So that's a little bit about me, but more importantly, I wanted to talk about our young and super keen team that I work with every day. So Dr. Katie Green, you'll be learning a little bit more directly from her today, and she'll be actually doing a mini interview with Dr. Jana Rieger, who is the founder and CEO of True Angle, who we're also working closely with to help them grow. But we're also, Katie and I also work closely with a third guy who's not here today named Ben Hilborn. So Ben is actually an engineer by trade as well. All of us have experience, kind of multidisciplinary experience across ventures from hardware, software, and everything in between. And so we bring this very unique kind of cross-discipline approach to how we think about unlocking various forms of non-dilutive capital to help ventures grow. We will get a little bit more specific with what that means and how we think about that from the venture perspective through the case study of True Angle and the work that we've done with them. But what you need to know as a founder is that we take a very specific, unique founder and venture-focused approach to unlocking this type of capital, leveraging the application process to also help ventures dig deep and understand how to answer questions like who their customer is, the value that they provide to them, and the business model that they envision as a way to serve and tap into that market. We have heavy experience with technical writing across many different sectors, a little bit more focus, obviously today on the health sector, and the complexity that some of these ventures trying to navigate that go-to-market strategy and commercialization efforts looks like. And we do have specific expertise in that area, and so we'll be talking more specifically in that. So Bob, if I could just get you to go to the next slide here. So we've designed the Funding Catalyst service basically out of empathy. I've been in the shoes of a founder trying to navigate the landscape of non-dilutive capital, which is really difficult to do. There's over 1,200 different applications available to Canadian-based founders and ventures. And our job as a Funding Catalyst team is to narrow those down and bring the ones into focus that are going to have the highest chance of a successful application and have the biggest impact for a venture at a specific point in time. The engagement is much more than grant writing services. So although that's one big part of what we do of taking some of the heavy lifting off of the process of actually creating applications, positioning them appropriately, it's also, in order to do that effectively, we have to dig very deep with the ventures that we work with and help them answer some of these questions that they're going to be asked when they're either pitching for private capital or looking to apply for grant or voucher or wage subsidy programs. And so we have to go through that process together. And that's why we've designed this service in a way that allows us to help them navigate some of the early stages of their own venture journey, leverage that process to actually put together content that's going to be valuable for the application writing process as well. Our goal is really to help ventures find the right funding at the right time to improve their chances of successful applications, but also help them accelerate the development of their venture. So that's just a little bit about the Funding Catalyst service. As Leah mentioned, we also offer some other services, mainly product traction. So this is kind of oftentimes works hand in hand. I'll talk about this a little bit more at the end of the presentation today. But the combination of our Funding Catalyst team, which is really designed to help with venture design, with accessing early stage capital, whether it be private or non-dilutive sources. The product traction team is really a team that digs in on the product side of things and comes up with a strategy that includes customer discovery, validation work, and building the first version of a product, or maybe an early version of a product, in order to develop and create the traction needed to actually go out and fundraise. And so obviously there's some overlap in these two service lines, and we do work closely with the other members of the Thin Air team in order to execute against these engagements. So this is truly a multifaceted founder-focused approach where if we need to ask a question of our capital team or our product team or our Funding Catalyst team, we can quickly and easily bring them into the conversation without having to worry too much about what the engagement actually looks like. It's all inclusive in how we engage with founders. So Bob, if you don't mind just going to the next slide really quickly, just a little bit about what you can expect if you're a founder that's looking to engage our team. We've designed the service with founders in mind. So what we're really trying to do is lean in, build the trust and become quick friends with the founders that we work with and build the trust necessary to execute on this type of engagement really quickly. Typically, we work well with companies that have some strong early signals of product market fit, early validation stage of their own development, likely raise some outside capital and are looking to accelerate their commercialization efforts. Probably have a little bit of content created, maybe a pitch deck, potentially a business plan, although that's rare these days. But some material that we can actually build off of and learn as much about how you speak about your business as possible, as quickly as possible, so that we can jump in and leverage all of that material that you've created to work quickly. And oftentimes we work with ventures to help them think about their financial and capitalization strategy, help them discover programs and other sources of capital that are available to them, and then actually do a lot of the heavy lifting of positioning and writing the applications. Of course, we can't do that on our own. This is very much a partnership that requires leaning in on both sides in order to be successful. And so we've designed this in a way that this is often not a one-time conversation where we learn as much as we can about the venture and then go off and do a bunch of writing. This is very much an engagement that lasts 6 to 8 weeks, and typically we're in touch on a regular basis throughout that process to capture the information we need and help you tell your story and help you solve some of the challenges with early stage venture development as you go. So that's just a little bit about our funding catalyst service. I don't want to talk for too much. I want to get to the stars of the show today. So I'll just give a quick introduction to Dr. Katie Green, who joined our team a short 5 months ago. So just to touch on, a few of those highlights there. We've been operating the service line for about 5 months. We've engaged with over 22 ventures. I think that number is actually higher now than it was even this morning. And we've helped these companies secure $2.35 million in various forms of funding. So we do have a proven model and a track record of success here. Of course, we have to work closely with founders that are at the right stage and help them position themselves and get to their right stage potentially before we actually lean in. But we have had some early successes we're really proud of, and always looking to engage with more ventures to help them accelerate their own development. So with that, I'll just give a quick introduction to Katie and let her also take over from there. Katie's going to talk today about some of the health ventures that she's been working with over the last couple months. Since she joined the FC team back in April. She comes to us from the University of Calgary, where she was a postdoctoral researcher working on furthering the understanding of early triggers of inflammation. So some really strong scientific background and academic background there. She's also had a keen interest in innovation and commercialization of that research through her PhD and postdoc at the U of C. You might pick up on this as she starts speaking, but Katie joins us from Ireland across the pond. And so she does have an accent that keeps us all entertained. I'll let her talk a little bit more about her journey over to Calgary about 5 or 6 years ago, and what attracted her to Thin Air Labs a short 5 or 6 months ago, and then obviously jump into the conversation with Jana and TrueAngle and some of the work that we've done together over the last couple of months. Katie, take it away.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Andrew. Really excited to talk about some of the work we've been doing and continue to do here at Thin Air. As Andrew mentioned, my background is really in kind of the academic science and research space. Really passionate about it, and I dabbled in the commercialization and innovation research space during my master's back in Ireland, but really pursued what brought me to Canada, which was doing my PhD at U of C. And during all that, I always loved hearing about all the research that was happening, but I was always frustrated is maybe a strong word, but kind of saddened by how much of that research gets stuck within the university, and really wanted to try and help whatever way I could to make some of that research really get out into the community and have an effect on people's lives or on the greater ecosystem. And another thing is I've always been really blown away by the immense amount of talent that's here in Alberta. And it's just an incredible, ecosystem here. And I think everyone can agree that the innovation ecosystem in Alberta is just at a really exciting point right now. And within that, I think health innovation is really on the rise. And, we're lucky that there's many programs from both the provincial and the federal governments that are in place to support these innovations. And unlike ventures in other disciplines, there are specific challenges associated with building health ventures. They have a larger requirement for clinical validation, clinical trials, different forms of approvals, whether that's Health Canada or FDA approvals. And we really understand how costly and how cumbersome this can be. And all of these challenges, we speak to ventures with every day, and we try and take the most personalized approach that we can when we work with a venture. And when we truly lean in, a big focus of ours is to really listen to what some of the hurdles that this venture might be facing in their innovation pathway, making sure that we make ventures with the most appropriate sources of funding that really support their journey and not, put them on a different journey just to fit a funding program. And ventures really come to the Funding Catalyst team. They're at really many different stages of their health venture journey. Some, are past all the regulatory and clinical approvals, and they're looking for help to access non-dilutive funding to support commercialization efforts, or others who are at, a much earlier stage in their development, who, need help with leveraging grants to fund things like, hiring people, some small pilot projects, some clinical validation. We work a lot with people who need access to different researchers at the university to do that very first level of validation. And obviously regulatory approvals is a big hurdle for many health ventures. So just to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the ventures we've been working with, one such is Persuna. They are a very early stage company. They're developing a device agnostic therapy guidance platform for ultrasound therapies. It's going to be a really great resource for clinicians who are interested in, adopting ultrasound therapies in their clinic, but that don't have to change equipment that's already there, or will be able to, purchase kind of the more cheaper ultrasound handheld devices that are becoming available on the market. And this really is a small but very mighty team, headed up by a very talented developer who's done most of their development work himself to date. And they really came to us just for some funding help with getting to the next stage on their commercialization, and really getting their the first version of their minimum viable product created. So we've been working with them to acquire grants to help them get contractors to carry out some of these key business development, marketing activities, and hopefully in the future to get the team some more development help. Another company we've been working with is Nimble. So Nimble is a very interesting company. They have this Simba capsule technology. It's a non-invasive tool for sampling the microbiota of the small intestine. It's going to have huge implications in both scientific research and in diagnostics. Nimble, when they came to us, they've already had an incredible track record and great success in acquiring non-dilutive funding. But our engagement with Nimble was a little different. We really focused on researching non-traditional sources or outside of the box forms of grant funding to help them further their research and clinical validation studies. And we're in the progress of executing on a grant for them right now, and hopefully we'll be successful. And the last venture that I would like to speak to, but certainly not the least venture, is TrueAngle, which was founded by Dr. Jana Rieger, who's on the call with us today. And she has successfully commercialized her research from her lab at the University of Alberta. And it's been a great journey that I've been very lucky to be a part of for the last couple of months, and been really excited to hear about all the things they're doing. So we're really lucky to have Jana with us today to talk about TrueAngle. And she's going to tell us a little bit about how she's been working with the Funding Catalyst team and her experiences. And I've forewarned her, she can be totally honest. We're not going to censor her if she has anything bad to say about us. But Jana, I'd love to pass it over to you to tell us a little bit more about TrueAngle and the incredible work you guys are doing.
Sure. Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. It's really my pleasure to be with you here this afternoon and to share a little bit of our story. TrueAngle is an Edmonton-based company that is developing data-based products that give people personal health insights about certain conditions. And the condition that we're working on right now is dysphagia, which is the medical term for a swallowing disorder. So for a long time, patients who've had this really terrible outcome from things like cancer, stroke, neurological disorders like Parkinson's and others like that, they haven't had a great option for getting therapy and getting the treatment they need. So they'd have to typically come into a hospital every single day, so they wouldn't do it. And what we did was we took a really big, cumbersome product that was stuck in a clinic, and we miniaturized it, mobilized it, made it smart, made it data-based, and are now getting it into the hands of patients who are out in the community. So it's been really exciting to watch this go. It was developed at the University of Alberta, so it's been exciting to watch it go from there over into the community, essentially.
Awesome. Thank you, Jana. I'd love to hear if you could tell us a little bit about, some of the challenges you guys were facing. I guess, gosh, it's been since April now that we've been working together. And maybe, what brought you to the Funding Catalyst team? What about these challenges brought you to us?
Yeah, for sure. So, having a background in academia, I wasn't scared of grant writing. It was something I got used to. I got used to the 10% success rate, and, feeling like a loser when you get your rejection back. So I understood how much time it took to write a grant, to get the funding that you needed to support your projects. And so when we commercialized initially, that was something that I still really believed in, was getting out there, finding some non-dilutive funding, fantastic way to extend your runway. And, you know, it was interesting. I was at a Silicon Valley immersion program pre-COVID, and there was a panel up there who were talking about they were entrepreneurs. They were talking about things that they wouldn't do again. And one of those things was that they said to the crowd who was listening was, drop the grant funding. Like, it's a waste of your time. It's too complicated. It takes way too much time. And I sat there thinking, geez, but you know, we've gotten a lot of grant funding. And it's been really important to us. But what was happening was, as the company and everything in the company was getting busier and busier, my time was getting, and everybody else who would have been contributing to that, their time was getting compressed. And so seeing the value in non-dilutive funding, but not having the time to do that. And I think there's two things that the Thin Air group really brought to the table. One of those was that you know, it takes a long time to read through a potential application and understand what you need for it, and understand if it's even right for you and for your company. And the one thing I found that it was so reassuring was when I'd say to Katie, okay, I heard about this particular grant, and what is it all about? She's like, oh yeah, we had done one of those, and here's what you need to know about it. So it was like snap. I didn't have to spend 8 hours figuring out that something was wrong for me. And for the company. And I think that the second thing that was really important was not all money is good money. So, you know, if you get a grant in a particular program that you aren't really suited for, it could do one of two things: take your company down the wrong road, or it could also put you in a position where you can't meet the milestones or the objectives of that particular funding body. And then you've got now a bad relationship on your hand with those funders. So I think that was the other thing that was really important with the interactions with Thin Air, was that they were really helpful in ensuring that it was the right funding at the right time for us.
And that's great. Thank you for sharing, Jana. I think, you know, on my side, when we first started meeting and discussing what you were doing at True Angle and meeting your team, it was really exciting for me because, you know, I got to pair my kind of love of the science medical space, and then, you know, while trying to help you achieve your next business milestone. And then the really exciting thing for me, and it sounds like, you know, not a lot of people love doing this, but I really like creating the narratives for the grant applications. And, you know, I think when we meet, I can really get behind what you guys are doing. So when we get to discuss, you know, what kind of milestones and what things you want to achieve with a project, being able to turn that into a narrative and kind of give it back, present it back to you to say, you know, am I capturing what it is that you guys want to do, and making sure, exactly as you said, that you're able to actually achieve those milestones and, you know, like abide by the, you know, the guidelines of this funding application.
Yeah, and Katie, that was one of my concerns. You said to be honest here, and so I'll be totally honest. One of my concerns when I first was thinking about interacting with you guys was, okay, they're not specialists in our area. Now, how much time am I really going to have to spend writing because they don't get it? And you know, I didn't find that was an issue at all. And of course, many of the grants that we're looking at are much more heavily commercialization focused, and there's much less emphasis on the actual sciencey parts of things. So it was a really easy thing for us to be able to work hand in hand with you, because most of the narrative you're writing were things that were available and that you could speak to very easily. And so really it took so much time off of our plates from having to do that. So.
Well, that's awesome to hear. Thank you, Jana. And I'd love to just talk to a little bit about, you know, one of the first applications we did together, which we were really great, that was successful, was the Alberta Innovates Commercialization Associate. And, you know, from that, I know you were able to get a business development manager for True Angle. And I'd love to hear about, you know, really what does that associate, the addition of this associate to True Angle, mean to your progression and your...
For sure. So just to give a bit of background to that as well, about being at the right time, right place. The other thing, Katie, that you've really been helpful in working on was, so that was an Alberta Innovates grant. And so it's like, hey, go talk to your technology advisor there, find out if you're at the right point for this. And so it was like, hand in hand with the funding agencies as well. So there were a lot of good connections there that if I didn't have them, you guys probably had them. So I think that was also really important. But with respect to that particular, the commercialization associate, our Mike Rue, who is our advisor at Alberta Innovates, he got me on the right path for when it was the right time. And what that has done for us is, after we finished our raise, our seed raise, which was at the end of April, we're at the right time to really start hitting the road with market traction and figuring that out. And so the funding gave us the support that we need to hire the business development manager who really is leading that initiative for us. And again, that was something that the rest of the founding team, prior to having that business development manager, were trying to do, learning about sales and being the salespeople and all that kind of stuff. And we had learned enough that we were at the point where it was really great, again, to have that person come in and just take off with that stuff.
Oh, that's great to hear. And, you guys have made so much progress in the last couple of months. Jana and I, just for context, we meet every Tuesday for 30 minutes and just check in and see where you're at. And it's always so exciting for me to see the progress week on week on week. I struggle to keep up with you guys sometimes. But the next project we approached together, it's a big project, and this one is kind of still at early steps. But so far, we've been successful in acquiring a good sum of money to carry out what will be a large pilot project for you guys. One that I'm very excited for you guys to carry out, and it really is, the next step towards your commercialization and getting your technology into the hands of more and more patients. So yeah, that one's a big exciting one for us. I know it's really early, so I don't want to put you on the spot to comment on it too much, but just if you could just frame what this means really to TrueAngle in a general sense, that would be great, please.
Yeah, so this one is really huge for us. It's a product demonstration grant. What it does for us is it brings an international, global industry player, large industry player to Alberta. It allows us to look at how we can put our two systems together for the benefits of patients. We had been courting this particular company for about a year and working on some background information, but this was the thing that really flipped the switch and allowed us to say, okay, it's all jets forward now. We're going to work on this project together. For the bigger picture for TrueAngle, this is a very strategic go-to-market partner in the shorter term, potentially, and who knows where it could lead from there.
Oh, that's incredible. I just have two more questions for you, and this is where I want you to truly be honest with us. What would you say your most valuable part of engaging with the Funding Catalyst team at Thin Air has been?
I'd say it's been just this reassurance that things are going to that we're going to find the right thing. It's going to get done on time. There's never any question about that. We're not going to be missing any pieces that get submitted. So it's just that confidence and that it's going to represent TrueAngle really well. The narrative is going to represent us well. There's not something in there that we're going to be embarrassed about. So that's been the best part of it, is just having that trust in you guys that you're going to do a top-notch job.
Awesome. And then last question is, would you recommend, an engagement with the Funding Catalyst team to other ventures?
Yeah, 100%, for sure.
Oh, that's incredible. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you, Jana, and I hope we get to do further engagements down the line, and for sure I know we'll stay up to date on your progress. But I really want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you for answering some of the questions.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Awesome. And with that, I'll pass it back to Ms. Leah Sarge for some questions.
You bet. Jenna, thank you so much for your comments today. It's always such a pleasure to see your face and to have you tell your story and Triangle's story. It's such an incredible venture. We're so excited to work with you at all times. So thank you so much for sharing that story with us today. Maybe if you've got any questions, of course, we encourage you to drop them into the chat at this time. But what we'll do right now is just take a couple of minutes to address some of the basic questions that often come up with the Funding Catalyst service. And Andrew, I'm going to look to you to answer some of those first questions. But Andrew, maybe right off the top, we've been talking about health ventures a lot today and this afternoon, but it's not just health ventures that we service with the Funding Catalyst service. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's definitely not. Out of the 22 plus ventures that we worked with, I'd say probably 50% of them are kind of in the health sector, and the rest are somewhat more general and range from everything from ag tech to software and kind of B2B SaaS. So everything in between. And in the venture world, all of that is kind of converging anyways. So there's a lot of overlap between the technology that people are bringing to market and the particular sectors that they're serving in. So we are agnostic to that. That being said, there's certainly more funding like grant and wage subsidies and that type of funding available for different sectors. So and that's all based on what various governments want to support in terms of the innovation sector. So health technologies and things that are being kind of commercialized in that sector are quite popular, and there's a lot of programs out there. And there's also some creative ways you can think about the academic side of what goes into a venture like this, and leveraging some funding that might be more readily available in the academic setting to progress the business and also lead to acceleration of the commercialization, but in a bit of a different way than something that's happening outside the lab or outside the academic institution. So for us, we're agnostic. We don't really look too much at the sector itself, but what we want to do before we actually engage with a venture is understand what is out there, and if we're actually going to be able to be successful with that. And we have no problem doing kind of a quick look and a quick search for programs that are available for a specific venture after a little bit of discovery, and letting that venture know that it might not be the right time to engage with us, or there might actually not be that many programs available to them for what they're working on, and then lead them to potentially other resources that might be a better fit at the right time or at that time for them. And so it's really just about matchmaking for us. Like, what we want to understand with a venture is what stage they're at, what their current short-term and long-term objectives are, and what the barriers are for them achieving those, and then trying to find the right program to help them navigate some of those hurdles and barriers. And so, as Janet kind of talked about this already, it's not about just finding a program that has a big dollar amount and bring that into the company, because what we see often is companies kind of chasing those opportunities and then leading them off on kind of down a rabbit hole that might not be aligned with their long-term objectives for the venture. And so what we really want to do is just dig deep and understand what is the vision and the roadmap for a particular venture within a certain sector. And then just try to do a bunch of research and try to find the right programs that we can inject at the right time, all with kind of a consideration of what the capitalization strategy of that venture needs to look like in order to actually achieve what they want to achieve. So that's a lot of critical thinking that the team has to kind of put into this across a number of different ventures that we're working with. So we wouldn't be able to do what we do without the minds of Katie and Ben and myself and the rest of the Thin Air team that can kind of chime in and help us think about how to troubleshoot some of those different scenarios. But yeah, Leah, it's back to your question a little bit more directly. We don't start the conversation with which sector are you in. We start with the conversation with, tell us about yourself as a founder and as an entrepreneur, and about your journey and where you are today and where you want to get to. And then we work backwards from there to try to help identify opportunities that can help them navigate that along the way.
Terrific. Thanks for that, Andrew. Jana, if I can just ask you one quick question while we still have you. You mentioned a little bit when you were talking about that not all money is good money, and it really is essential to find that good fit. Can you talk a little bit more about that so some of the ventures on the call and some of the founders might understand what you mean by that a bit more?
Yeah, for sure. So, I'll give you one example from my own experience. without getting too deep into it, but there was a fairly easy path to some non-dilutive funding, and it required that we set out a project along a certain pathway. And at the time, looking back at it now, it was one of those projects that really was on the side. Essentially, it wasn't necessarily focused at the moment on our primary business and what we needed to do as a company now. It was kind of like a nice to have, but not a need to have. But now we have funders who are looking at, are you hitting those milestones? And it turns into a bit of a distraction for a team when you have something like that. And yet you want to meet those milestones. You want to be true to that application that you put in. And so that's what I mean. It's, you've got the money in your hand, but it might not be the smartest money because it's not keeping you on focus and on point.
Thank you for that, Jana. And I can see you nodding your head, Andrew. I feel like you want to weigh in on this one. You speak often about how critical it is to get that matchmaking just right, and then to take that grant writing process off the founder's plate so they can stay focused on that critical bit, which is building their business.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add there, just as I'm thinking about some of our experience with founders as well, is sometimes understanding what that critical path is most of what the venture needs help with. And so it can, when you're strapped for cash and time and resources and money are all scarce in the early stages of venture development, any source of funding can look like a good opportunity because you just need to stay alive. You just need to get some more validation with what you're doing. And so you can say, okay, well, I can justify this thing because it would be easy and chances are high that we'd be successful with an application, but it might actually lead you down a path that you don't want to be down. And so a lot of the times, like especially in the early kind of discovery stages, whether we're maybe before we actually lean in and on a formal engagement and we're just getting to know a venture, oftentimes it's really just a matter of working with the founding team to help them understand what that critical path is. And sometimes most of that is actually taking a step back, pulling them out of the weeds to understand what the vision actually is for what they're trying to do. And then again, working backwards to say, okay, so what's the path to get there? And wait, why are you distracted by this over here? Just and it's really for us about being curious and asking questions. We don't know all the answers. But we can certainly ask questions that are going to help kind of direct and narrow in the focus for a founding team. And then once we kind of see the path and see the vision the way that they see it, we can then be much more effective with identifying the right programs and actually putting together and positioning the applications in a way that's aligned with the path of the venture. And so there's it's a lot of that kind of early work is necessary in order for us to be really effective. And that's why it's not always the right time for us to engage with ventures. Sometimes they're just a little bit too early. The company needs to mature a little bit. Their understanding of the market opportunity or their customer segment needs to be a little bit deeper. And so we can also help founders kind of do that even before we take on an engagement like this. We have put together some workshop style programming around that we've actually tested on a couple different companies and has been super successful with. So there are other ways to engage our funding catalyst team without just, hey, we're going to put our head down and help you put together 3 applications. Sometimes it needs a little bit more early kind of foundational work. We call that kind of investment readiness work or venture design work. And that's really, really important because of exactly what Jana was describing there. Whereas you don't want to just chase it for the sake of chasing it. And the same is true on the private capital side. You want to make sure that you're partnered with the right funding organizations, whether that's private or public. And there's alignment around what you're trying to do and achieve and how that funding is going to help you do that. So yeah, that's I see this a lot. So obviously pretty passionate about it.
Clearly. Thanks for that, Andrew. We have a question coming in from Shanil Pathak, and he wants to know what's required to work with us and what's the cost?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I talked about this a little bit. So we typically are, I guess, optimally effective when a company has a little bit of early traction. So likely an early product on the market with some validation around that, at least as a proof of concept or an early MVP, have probably raised a little bit of private capital. I don't think that there's any program out there that doesn't have some kind of matching contribution that's required from the venture side as well. And so there needs to be some funding so that we, like in the business already, so that we can, and we're much more effective if we can leverage that to help unlock further capital as Jana described it, extend the runway of the business, help achieve or tackle very specific barriers for growth or development. But there needs to be a little bit of capital in the business already in order to do that really effectively. And if the company's not quite there yet, then we'll probably look at a bit of a different engagement, something a little bit more investment readiness focused, business model development or design focused, that kind of thing. In terms of cost, every venture is different. So I can't get super specific with that. It really starts with a couple conversations and some discovery of where the venture's at and the stage that they're at. But typically it's a $5,000 to $10,000 kind of engagement over 6 to 8 weeks. And we do this all in sprint form. What we really do is narrow in on what are the things that you need from us and our team. And then we basically scope it out from there. And that's different for every venture. Sometimes a venture doesn't have very specific documents or content that they haven't created that they want us to do for them. Or sometimes they don't have that, but they want to do that. And they want us to focus on identifying the right programs or the right funding opportunities. So every engagement is actually quite different. There's, as much as we try to standardize some of that, it's almost impossible to do because there's just so many nuances in the venture world, on the venture side and also on the program side as well. And so what we start with is a couple conversations, and we're more than happy to spend some time with founders. They're the heroes of our story. So we're trying to find ways throughout that process to be helpful beyond just getting to a kind of a proposal state. But through that process of getting to know each other, we identify kind of the optimal scope of this engagement and where we can have the biggest impact. And then we scope it out and identify the price point from there. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a ballpark, but like I said, every venture is different. It really depends on the scope of work that's expected of us.
Terrific. Thanks, Andrew. We have a question coming in from John. He's asking, my company is not based in Calgary. Do we need to be local in order to engage with you? Great question, John. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely not local. We're at the very least a Canada-wide company. We do by proxy focus more in Alberta and the kind of Western Canadian market, but we actually are engaged with companies across the country as well. Depending on where you're located, there's going to be different types of funding opportunities available to you. So we've talked a little bit about some of the programs available through Alberta Innovates here locally. Most provinces will have kind of similar support organizations in the innovation space, although they're different and they operate differently. And so our job is to kind of do that heavy lifting thinking and research around like which programs are available to you in your area and what's the expectation for you as a company. Like, for instance, if you receive funding from a particular funding body in a specific area, is the expectation that you're going to be hiring people in that region? Is the expectation that you're going to be bringing a partnership into that or expanding your HQ to that area? We do, as Janet kind of talked about the work that Katie did with her, a lot of that heavy lifting research around like, what are the implications if we go after this program or that? Answer the question very, very directly. No, you don't have to be located here for us to engage.
Terrific. Andrew, thanks for that. Katie, if I can just direct a question at you. The work that you do with the health companies, as you said, has to do a lot with storytelling. But of course, there's a lot of regulatory specific sort of things that need to be understood when it comes to grant writing, specifically for health science companies. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that really is unique to the life science companies that we work with and engage with?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll just clarify it by saying, we don't pretend to be regulatory experts, and we're certainly not. We definitely have experts in our network that we will refer people to if they ask. But usually most ventures that come to us already have someone that they're working with. But yeah, within life sciences and healthcare companies, because these innovations and products that are being developed can often affect people's lives or their health, there's just a higher burden of validation, in order to get any type of, health product, something that has a claim about health on the packaging, that has to go through rigorous approvals with Health Canada, even if it's a natural product. There's licensing approvals that need to be done. All of those, before you can even apply for them, require some amount of validation work. Sometimes that can just be, in animals. Sometimes it has to be kind of a small clinical trial, or when you're talking about a pharmaceutical, obviously you're talking about a multi-stage, very large clinical trial. So all of these are huge considerations. When you're talking about like an actual technical device or unit, there's ITA approvals, there's other things like that. And again, these are all considerations that need to be at least addressed in an application. Most funding organizations, like even whether it's private or public funding, they're going to want to know that the team on any venture has addressed them, or at least has plans to address a lot of these approvals. So yeah, it's something that we can definitely help a venture identify and outsource the right expertise to get them to the next level.
Terrific. Thank you for that, Katie. Jen, if I can just ask you one more quick question. I know a lot of founders are curious, like, what's it actually like to work with Thin Air Labs? Like, what are they like? Are they like really friendly? Are they warm? Are they really stuffy and strange? So maybe you can just tell everybody somewhat candidly what we're like to spend time with.
Well, stuffy and strange wouldn't be the first things that would come to mind. Definitely friendly and warm. But I think, and that's important, but really, really knowledgeable. And as well, there's links between the different programs within Thin Air. We're part of another program. And so there's this cross understanding of where we are as a company and what we're doing on all these different fronts. And so if I had to find some other adjectives to describe the team, it's just like capable, hardworking, reliable. And I look forward to all my weekly visits with Katie. It's always pleasant, and it's a great way to keep things moving along with the process. So.
Terrific. Thanks for that, Jana. See, there's the real story. There's the goods right there. We've got a comment coming in here from Jordan. I agree with Jana's assessment. Thin Air is awesome to work with, just to throw another opinion out there. Thanks so much, Jordan. Always great to hear that. Andrew, maybe that's just an opportunity for talk a little bit about the product traction service and how sometimes there's crossover there, or how one can lead to the other.
Yeah, and I mean, this really kind of is rooted in just, I guess as a team, we're really just focused on venture impact. And so what we're always looking for is, and you kind of need to be warm and build trust and build a relationship with the ventures. Like, this is a partnership that we develop over time. Once we get to that stage, we can really quickly identify other ways we can help a venture. And in some cases, if we see that enough times, we just develop a service line around that. So that's kind of what happened with both the Funding Catalyst team and the Product Traction team. So in the Funding Catalyst example here, like this is lived experience for me. I've been on the other side of this table as a founder myself. I've gone through the application process. I've gone through the research in terms of what programs are out there and how I can kind of be scrappy and resourceful and capture as much as I possibly can. And then we actually designed this service with very much the founder's kind of lens in mind. The same is true for the Product Traction team. So oftentimes when you're fundraising, and this is kind of like there's some art and some science to like, how do you actually raise your first round or raise like an early round of funding? The science is like, what's like the quantifiable market opportunity? So who are you trying to serve? How many of these customers are out there? Like, what does the business model kind of roughly look like that you're trying to execute on? And if all of that makes sense, that's one thing. And then the art side of it is like, how do you what's the narrative, or how do you showcase that? And a lot of times it comes down to, well, what you'll often hear from private investors or from funding grant opportunities is, oh, come back when you have more traction, or can you show us the traction that you've been able to create, or basically as a validation point of what you're doing. And so Product Traction is really a service that's designed around how do you get your first customers, and then how do you get your next 10, and then how do you get your next 100, and how do you do that in a very, very lean way that you can kind of move quickly on and also execute on some other components of the business all at the same time. So this is all kind of happening in parallel. 3 months in the world of venture is like a year, if not longer. Like, you get a lot done, but that's because all of this is happening at once. And so when we're working with a venture and we identify, hey, let's help you unlock some early stage capital from some of these programs, or maybe you actually need to actually put together a round and raise that from your immediate network or angel investors. We start there, but it's always with the thought in mind of like, how are you going to tell that story? How are you going to show and prove the validation or the traction that you're able to generate to tell that story to investors or to funders? And product traction services are really designed to do that in as lean a way as possible. So what this kind of feels like, so we have a team of product managers and software developers primarily and engineers that can all build, but there's a heavy emphasis on customer validation, early market research and understanding of the opportunity, designing and executing and facilitating on customer experiments to understand what the product offering should be, storyboarding, like all of that kind of early stage work that has to go into building the right product, so to speak. And then only when we have a really solid understanding of what that should be do we actually build. And so as Janet kind of described, this is multidisciplinary. So this doesn't happen like, let's do this first and then we'll wait a month and then we'll go on to this one. That's not how venture works. We will jump in at the right time with the right offering to have as much impact with the venture as possible. And then oftentimes we'll kind of insert another opportunity to engage in a different way along the way and do those all at once. But it is very much multidisciplinary. And so we're a team of unlike minds. We're just trying to be as efficient with everyone's time as possible, ours, but most importantly, the founders' time as well. And so I think one thing that I think of that we really try to adhere to as a team is no fluff, which means that, yeah, we don't mind some chit chat. We don't mind getting to know people and you know, the human element of what we do. But we also understand how scarce time is and focus is for early stage ventures. And so what we really want to do is get to the outcomes and make sure that there's alignment around the outcomes that we're trying to create with the venture really quickly, and then identify like a solution or a way to achieve those. And then work with the founder to understand the best way to work with them to help them do that. Maybe that's like a more passive approach where we're just like, hey, we can be available once every couple of weeks for half hour, just so you know we can provide some perspective and advice. We don't know the answers, but sometimes you just need a backboard. Or you know, when the time is right, it's time for you to accelerate your progress here. Let's put together a more formal proposal that's going to allow us to lean in and pull in other resources on our team to help you execute. The only way to really do that effectively is to build relationships early, build partnerships with the ventures we engage with, and just be really thoughtful with how we approach you know, each stage of an engagement. Always having kind of the founder's view in mind of you know, if I was in their shoes as a founder, would I look at this and say, is this going to get me? Is this going to accelerate my development as a company? Is this going to change the trajectory of my venture? And if the answer to those two questions are yes, then it's easy to get to a yes as in terms of the engagement. But that's always how we're looking at this, is like we want to be as efficient and as effective with everyone's time as possible.
Absolutely. And then we want to set these ventures up and these founders up for success on their own, for independence, move forward and grow on their own.
That's sorry, Leah, a really important point there. Our goal in all of these engagements is never to create a dependency on thin air. It's always to build capacity within the team so that they can grow and we can kind of separate from the day-to-day or like the in the weeds at the right time and they can flourish. So we always have that in mind with every service line. We're really not trying to create a dependency on us. And in fact, it's not a good scenario for any of us. We're not a dollar per hour type group or service offering. We're really trying to find the best ways to help accelerate the businesses that we work with, and then allow them to you know, grow independently from any service offering for us. But obviously, we're still there as their number one cheerleaders along the way.
You bet. We like to be cheerleaders. It's kind of fun. But it speaks to trust, right? That's what we try to do here. When we say we're a founder first organization, we like to build trust, and trust equals velocity, and velocity equals scalability. So that's how we like to think of things here at Thin Air Labs. We are coming up to our time. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So I just want to mention again that if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Andrew Brown directly, andrew@thinairlabs.ca. We will be sending up follow-up emails to this webinar. And again, this webinar is being recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel as soon as it's cleaned up a little bit for public consumption. And once again, thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Particularly, thank you to Janet Rieger for spending some time with us. We know how valuable your time is. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Thanks to Katie for telling us a little bit about your expertise and what you're doing with the Funding Catalyst team. And of course, thanks also to Andrew Brown for helping us out every single time when it comes to these Funding Catalyst webinars. And in the background, thanks so much to Bob for putting this together for us and being our director at large. So thanks to everybody. Let's get out there and build what's next. Again, if you have any questions, Andrew@thinairlabs.ca. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next time.